Keon pushed me to start this podcast well over a week now ago, so I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about this past week. The first podcast was with Keon to discuss my plans to create some new content. Now, for a lot of you, I've focused primarily locally and on hip-hop. I believe if I'm going to grow, and due to the virus, I have to expand not only genre, category, but also distance. So I've decided to go ahead and do an audio-only based podcast. Now, this creates some challenges. Now, on the other hand, it also is a lot quicker to process. So, I'm wanting to talk a little bit about the individuals that I met this previous week and talk a little bit about them. Now, one of the first people to like the post on the Total Potential podcast was a gentleman from upstate New York called Hannah J, and I'll have all of the individuals linked down in the description below. And if you haven't, please subscribe. Now, Hannah J comes from a similar environment as mine. I live about 45 minutes out of the city and have a very, I would even say, non-existent community where I'm at. Hannah J shares the same experience, having a handful of friends with no coast, and they are a small group of artists up in upstate New York, and definitely stay tuned for his episode. He also talks about some of his major influences that he had been listening to since he was very, very young. Now, moving on to podcast number 3, we have Mitchell Lopez from Miami, Florida, who taught me a little bit about not only the history of soccer as a professional soccer player, but also showing the emotional side of coaching, where Mitchell was a coach for a females Swedish soccer team. So definitely a lot of great information, as well as the history of Brazil and how Brazil has such a storied history in the World Cup and in the founding of the World Cup. So that's definitely something to check out. Mitchell Lopez, his details will also be down in the description below. Now, for our 4th podcast, a little bit of a stretch, but still, hits me at home. The previous company that I worked with specialized in DJs, so this was nothing new. Also, with our DJ Jam session, I was lucky enough to work with 10 DJs, so I had some experience. I got to speak to a gentleman from South Beach named Chris Gravity, where he talked a little bit about how, compared to mine and the other artists that I spoke about earlier, Hannah J, the community is a much more alive in South Beach. So definitely stay tuned for his episode, for episode 4, with Hannah J, Mitchell Lopez, and Chris Galaxy. And not last but first, but definitely not least, Keon. Thank you for the inspiration and the push that I needed. I appreciate it, man. And if you haven't, please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And this was some of the people that I spoke to this past week.